Welcome back. Today's focus is on the analysis of comparative strengths of the security forces of Iraq, Afghanistan, and southern Vietnam. This is a very data-dense section that suggests troops per inhabitant and troops per square mile are the largest factors in disrupting the Taliban or the enemy. And some of the results are very staggering. For instance, comparing only Army forces, ARVN had 8.5 times the number of regular and irregular soldiers that Afghanistan has today in a country that is 1/4 the size. That is huge. It goes on. Their paramilitary police forces of southern Vietnam were approximately equal to the number in Afghanistan, but because South Vietnam's has a smaller area, the South Vietnamese police had a force density 4 times higher than the AMP today. Additionally, there were about 500,000 what they call regional forces, provincial forces, who were irregulars formerly part of the ARVN that were in the country. It states that Afghanistan had on paper at this time in, I think 2017-18, about 30,000. Showing that the numerical militia advantage for South Vietnamese to Afghanistan was about 35-1. And again, in a country that is 1/4 the size. For Afghanistan to have the counterinsurgent militia strength today that South Vietnam had per square mile in 1970, there would have to be over 4 million people in the Afghan Local Police. So that's just the sheer number of forces that, again, from the statistics, has been shown to be the most quantitative factor in reducing the enemy's overall activity and effectivity in the area. For example, I was in Afghanistan from 2010 to 2011. Our brigade was backfilled by a battalion because remember about that time that Obama was reducing the forces. We were beginning to pull out of Afghanistan. But I couldn't imagine being responsible as a battalion for all of those areas. We were in charge a lot of this southeastern portion of Afghanistan. And so while it's been rough to see the fall of Afghanistan and the extraction and all that stuff going on, I had already experienced some of that because whenever we left some of these big FOBs, they just simply weren't able to be backfilled because they were backfilled with 1/4 or 1/3 of the soldiers. One FOB in particular, FOB Shank, that we ran missions into and out of, about 2 months after we left, I believe it was evacuated and redistributed throughout the battalion, and it was left to the Afghan National Army and the Afghan police. But about 4 months after that, so that's about 6 months after we got back, there was a journalist that went through there and took a bunch of pictures and wrote this big article about what had happened to this massive base. And I actually got a hold of that article and could see what happens and what is happening now on a large scale in Afghanistan, and between the vehicles being taken over and all of the wood being used for scrap and everything being destroyed. For your frame of reference, again, that was in 2010, 2011 that those things were already happening. But yet I was shocked, everybody's shocked that these things are happening and playing out like they are now, but we had already seen the writing on the wall. This was already, we already had this knowledge. The problems here only begin to compound as we get more specific. Because again, the data says that the largest number of soldiers is the biggest factor. But then when we look, we dive even deeper into the data. The ARVN had a well-developed and functional logistics system, while it is well documented and widely accepted that the ANA had virtually no logistics capability. The ARVN had an abundance of tactical vehicles, armored personnel carriers, and 2.5-ton trucks. The ANA is hamstrung by vehicle and fuel shortages. As this researcher suggests, as much as 2/3 of the fuel delivered to the ANA is being siphoned off by corruption, according to current estimates. Furthermore, the Afghans' ability to keep running the relatively high maintenance and high-tech vehicles that they inherited from the United States is also very limited. Even just in 2014, for example, the Afghan 205 Corps reported that 50% of its vehicles were already inoperable. And on December 11, 2014, departing International Security Assistance Force, ISAF Commander Lieutenant General Joseph Anderson told this news agency that the Afghan security forces could not perform even basic maintenance. He's quoted, "The problem is you don't have units fixing stuff at their level. This is inept. There's nothing to do with corruption. This is purely ineptitude. The ARVN also had a full complement of communications gear down to the platoon level with well-trained and experienced operators working in tactical codes. The ANA has few radios and communicates largely in the clear with cell phones. And I don't know how it was for you, but as a platoon leader, and even after my platoon leader time, working with different Afghan National Army, it was not uncommon that I'd have to chew one of the ANA guys' ass because what is he doing? He's smoking hashish and getting high, literally, while we're trying to emplace on a mission. Furthermore, the ARVN possessed a competent and high-functioning medical corps which provided good quality care to wounded soldiers. In Afghanistan, the 2011 ANA Dawood Hospital scandal, when it was discovered that forces of emaciated ANA wounded had died of their wounds for want of food and basic medications, which the ANA senior medical officer was responsible for selling actually on the black market, speaks for the state of ANA's marginal medical capability. Compounding the problem, in one of the most disgraceful episodes of the Afghan War, the U.S. military officers attempted to even cover up the scandal, of course. He goes on to talk very, very specifically about this militia force that was ex-soldiers from the ARVN. So these ex-soldiers returned to their homes, returned to their homeland areas, and they began to develop organized local militias that again numbered just over 500,000 in a space that is 1/4 the size of Afghanistan, and states that they defended approximately 9,000 key terrain features, nearly half of them in strategically vital this one particular region. Eventually, these 500,000 soldiers, this militia, were more fully integrated into the ARVN units and placed under the command of the Joint General Staff. This was vastly more military and military-based and military effective than having such militia forces under the control of the Ministry of Interior operating disjointedly with the military. So they were unified, as in the case of Afghanistan today. So the militia in Afghanistan are operating separately. So yes, they are operating separately, but also their forces are, again, 35-1. And here's the key as it relates especially to this moment in history right now, that in 1969, with the withdrawal of the U.S. forces, this militia group became increasingly important, and its units began to be attached to ARVN battalions directly and to deploy with the ARVN outside of their home provinces, which was a significant force multiplier, which again was the singular most significant statistic disrupting the enemy and maintaining peace. It goes on and states that these militia, they did take heavy, intense casualties in the years to come, but they fought crazy super hard because they were actually, they're militia, so they're local, so they were defending their homes. Their backs were literally to their homes and the enemy was out in front of them, so they were fighting with everything that they had, and it was an intense fight, and a lot of them died. There was a high attrition of these folks, but they had that stick-to-itness, this stubbornness, because behind them were their homes. So out of all of this, it doesn't say this here, but it seems to me that one of the stronger undercurrents is this huge militia force that had ownership over their homes, their homeland, their unity, their villages. These were the ones there that were literally being the sticks in the mud, standing there, saying no, and helping more fully to eradicate the enemy's progress. And last little tidbit here, on an individual soldier level, the overall quality of ANA recruits had always been low, and almost all of them are from the rural areas and in search for what? For money. So the motivating factor for money, the lack of unity and understanding Afghanistan as a country and the more tribal mindset, in addition to the lack of capability of learning the communications, and all these different factors boil in to this perfect storm of impotence. As this researcher noted in 2013, the drive to increase ANA numbers rapidly resulted in the weak vetting of recruits, and he's quoted as saying, "There has been little effort to vet recruits even in terms of physical fitness. Physically weak, drug-addicted, and under-motivated recruits have often proved unable to withstand even the rather mild 10-week basic training course." So as we tried to help ramp up the numbers of ANA, what do? Just like we did when we tried to ramp up the numbers of US soldiers. We had more waivers, we're taking less quality people and soldiers, and what are we getting? Not as awesome of results. In short, this is a direct quote, the ARVN was a large, capable, well-equipped, and modern-day army that could shoot, move, and communicate, and sustain. The ANA, 1/8 the size, could barely shoot. So that's Afghanistan, but as for Iraq, after Rumsfeld, Douglas, Faith, and Paul Bremer made the decision to disband the entire Iraqi army in May 2003 following the occupation of Baghdad, sending home hundreds of thousands of trained and capable soldiers, NCOs, and officers with their weapons, there was never any real possibility of creating a cohesive, professional Iraqi army in the political time frame available. As war correspondent David Axe notes, quoting, fundamentally, the fault was America's for destroying the existing army, but there was nothing America could do after that to build a truly inclusive and effective new army. The Iraqi army that was created, armed, and trained for almost a decade by the United States at a cost of some $25 billion, disintegrated as the military force within hours of the summer of 2014 at Mosul in the face of a few hundred ISIS regulars. So again, all of this that is going on now and maybe even in the future is emotionally jarring, but when we begin to look at the rational facts, we can begin to understand it more. And the troubling part is that when we get a hold of these facts, sometimes it may seem to add fuel to the fire. And indeed, many times it does, because it seems blasphemous that we would do this. But remember, this isn't about inciting an internal emotional riot. This is about sorting out the facts, and instead of soldiers just blindly accepting what's really going on, we have to begin to think for ourselves. And sure, most of us probably aren't soldiers anymore, we're veterans, but we are the leaders of tomorrow. We are the ones that are gonna be the decision makers. We do have an opportunity to influence massive, massive amounts of people. We can make an impact. Veterans are one of the backbones of the United States. The United States is one of the main backbones of the world. We do have power. We do have more and more clarity. We have more and more sense of meaning and purpose that's defined by us, not by some correspondent or some news agency or some celebrity or somebody. It's us. We get the chance to do the autopsy afterwards, to sort out the facts, to figure out what it's going to mean to us, what purpose it's going to serve in our life, and what we get to do. And yes, some of this may be very, very painful, but for me, I would prefer to know that pain, understand that pain very clearly, and keep that pain, because that pain is going to help me make different decisions tomorrow. Because number one, too, let me say, I'm not completely identifying with that pain. That pain isn't going to overwhelm me in my being and affect my relationships with people or myself. I get to understand that pain. That pain is indeed outside of me, but I am going to choose to have a relationship with that pain, to use it and wield it in such a way where it propels me to make different and better decisions and to help other people do the same. So all of these things are your choice, and it's through consistent reflection. Reflection. I heard recently in a lecture that truly reflection is the character building process, that it is through reflection that we refine our character. Reflection is the process of the sculptor sculpting the massive project out of stone. The chisel and the hammer is the reflection process. So it's your choice. Choose wisely. Choose your hard.